The desert heat hit like a sledgehammer as Chief Petty Officer Marcus Rivera adjusted his rifle scope for the third time in 10 minutes. Sweat dripped down his face, mixing with the camouflage paint that had started to streak in the brutal Afghan sun. Through his earpiece, he could hear the steady breathing of his teammates scattered across the rocky outcrop they'd been watching for the past 6 hours. "Eyes on target building," whispered Petty Officer Jake Thompson from his position 30 meters to the left. "Still seeing movement in the second-floor windows." Rivera pressed his eye to the scope again, scanning the mud brick compound that intelligence had marked as a high-value target location. Somewhere inside that building, according to their briefing, was Ahmad Bashar, a Taliban commander responsible for coordinating attacks against coalition forces across 3 provinces. The man had American blood on his hands, and today was supposed to be payback time. "Control, this is Serpent 6, Rivera spoke quietly into his radio. "We have eyes on the target building. Request permission to move to Phase 2. The response crackled through his earpiece after a few seconds. "Serpent 6, you are cleared for approach. Weather window closing in 4 hours. Make it count." Rivera felt his stomach tighten. 4 hours wasn't much time, but it would have to be enough. He'd been leading SEAL teams for 8 years, long enough to know that operations rarely went according to plan. Today felt different though. The intelligence seemed too clean, too perfect. In his experience, when everything looked easy, it usually meant trouble was coming. "All right, listen up," Rivera said to his four-man team through the comm system. "We move in 2 groups. Thompson and Martinez take the north approach. Williams and I will circle south. Remember, we want this guy alive if possible. Command wants to ask him some questions." Petty Officer Carlos Martinez shifted his position behind a boulder, checking his ammunition for the dozenth time. At 26, he was the youngest member of the team, but Rivera trusted him completely. The kid had steady hands and nerves of steel, proved in 3 previous deployments. "Chief, something feels off about this whole setup," Martinez said quietly. "Yeah, I know," Rivera replied. "But we have our orders. Stay sharp and trust your training." Williams, the team's demolitions expert, was already moving into position with the practiced silence that had kept them all alive through countless missions. At 32, he was a veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan, a man who could read danger in the way dust settled or birds stopped singing. Today, he noticed the valley was too quiet. "Control, this is Williams. I'm not hearing the usual sounds out here. No insects, no birds. Even the wind seems to have stopped." Rivera paused his movement and listened carefully. Williams was right. The natural sounds of the Afghan mountainside had gone silent, like nature itself was holding its breath. In his experience, that usually meant predators were nearby. "Stay alert, everyone," Rivera ordered. "Something's got the local wildlife spooked." The team began their careful descent toward the target compound, using the rocky terrain for cover. Each man moved with the fluid precision that came from years of training and combat experience. They communicated through hand signals when possible, saving radio chatter for essential information only. As they got closer to the building, Rivera could see why intelligence had been confident about this location. The compound sat in a natural bowl, surrounded by hills on 3 sides. There was only one main road in and out, and it was currently empty. From a tactical standpoint, it looked like the perfect place to corner their target. Thompson's voice came through the earpiece, barely audible. "Chief, I'm seeing armed guards on the roof. Count 4, maybe 5 individuals with AK-47s. They look alert but not alarmed." "Copy that. Continue approach but be ready to go loud if necessary." Rivera and Williams crept closer to their assigned position, using a dry creek bed for concealment. The ancient watercourse provided excellent cover, but it also meant they were moving through a natural funnel. If someone wanted to trap them, this would be the perfect place to do it. Williams suddenly froze, holding up a closed fist to signal Rivera to stop. The demolitions expert had spotted something that made his blood run cold. "Chief, we've got a problem. I'm seeing trip wires across this creek bed. This isn't just a hideout, it's a trap." Rivera felt ice form in his stomach despite the desert heat. "Control, this is Serpent 6. We have indicators of prepared defenses. Request immediate intelligence update on target location." The radio stayed silent for what felt like an eternity. When Control finally responded, the news was worse than Rivera had feared. Serpent 6, we're showing significant heat signatures converging on your location from multiple directions. You have approximately 20 to 30 individuals moving toward your position. How long until we have backup? Rivera asked, already knowing the answer wouldn't be good. Nearest support is 45 minutes out. You need to extract immediately. Rivera looked around at their position and realized they had walked into a perfectly prepared ambush. The intelligence had been too good because it was bait. Someone had wanted them here, in this exact spot, at this exact time. All units, this is Serpent 6. We are compromised. Prepare for immediate extraction under fire. But, even as he gave the order, Rivera could see armed figures appearing on the ridgelines around them. They were surrounded, outnumbered at least 6 to 1, and running out of options fast. The nearest cover was over 200 meters away across open ground. Thompson's voice crackled through the radio, tight with controlled tension. Chief, I count 15 hostiles on the North Ridge. They've got us zeroed in. Martinez chimed in from his position. South Ridge showing 12 more. They're setting up machine gun positions. Rivera did quick math in his head. Against those numbers, in this terrain, their chances of fighting their way out were slim. But, surrender wasn't an option. These weren't regular Taliban fighters. Someone had planned this ambush too carefully, which meant they were dealing with experienced fighters who wanted American prisoners. Williams, what do you have for making us an exit? I can blow the rock face on the east side, might give us some cover and confusion. But, we'll be moving toward higher ground with no backup. Rivera considered their options. They could try to fight their way back the way they came, but that would mean crossing open ground under fire from multiple positions. They could hunker down and wait for support, but 45 minutes was a lifetime in combat. Or they could push forward into unknown territory and hope to find better defensive positions. The decision was made for him when the first shots rang out. High-velocity rifle rounds started slamming into the rocks around their position, sending stone chips flying like shrapnel. The enemy had decided not to wait for them to make the first move. Contact! Contact! Thompson shouted into his radio as he returned fire at muzzle flashes on the North Ridge. Multiple hostiles engaging from elevated positions. Rivera rolled behind a boulder as bullets whined overhead. The enemy had excellent positioning and plenty of ammunition. They were firing in controlled bursts, conserving ammunition while keeping the SEALs pinned down. This was professional work. Control, this is Serpent 6. We are taking heavy fire from multiple positions. Enemy has us pinned in a kill zone. Urgently request air support or artillery. Serpent 6, negative on air support. Friendly aircraft are grounded due to weather conditions. Artillery is available but danger close to your position. Rivera felt sweat running down his back that had nothing to do with the heat. Artillery support meant calling in explosives close enough to their position that the margin for error was measured in meters. One miscalculation and they'd be killed by their own support fire. Williams had found a position where he could return fire while staying behind cover. Chief, these guys know what they're doing. They're using fire and movement tactics, keeping us suppressed while they maneuver for better positions. Rivera could see what Williams meant. This wasn't random shooting. The enemy fighters were coordinating their attacks, with some providing covering fire while others moved to new positions. Someone with military training was directing this operation. Martinez's voice came through the radio with barely controlled panic. Chief, I'm seeing more movement to the south. Looks like they're trying to flank us through that ravine. Rivera realized their situation was deteriorating rapidly. The enemy wasn't content to keep them pinned down. They were actively working to surround the SEAL team completely. Once that happened, it would be over. Thompson, can you see our back trail? Negative, Chief. Too much terrain between us and our entry point. But I'm hearing engine noises. Sounds like vehicles moving to block our exit route. Rivera closed his eyes for a moment, running through their training scenarios. They had practiced urban combat, desert warfare, mountain operations, and every conceivable type of engagement. But this situation was turning into something beyond their normal parameters. The enemy fire intensified suddenly, with multiple machine guns opening up simultaneously. Heavy caliber rounds hammered their defensive positions, turning solid rock into powder and creating a wall of deadly metal in the air above them. It was clear the enemy was preparing for a major assault. All units, prepare for incoming assault. Conserve ammunition and make every shot count. Rivera checked his rifle and estimated his remaining ammunition. In a prolonged firefight, they would run out of bullets long before the enemy did. Their only advantages were superior training and better accuracy, but those wouldn't matter if they were overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Williams had found a small depression in the rock that offered some protection from multiple angles. "Chief, I've got eyes on the machine gun position on the south ridge. I can take it out with a grenade, but I'll have to expose myself to make the throw." "Negative. We can't afford to lose anyone right now." But, even as Rivera spoke, he knew they were going to have to take risks soon. The enemy was tightening their circle, and staying passive would only make their situation worse. Thompson's voice cut through the gunfire. "Movement on the north ridge. Looks like they're preparing to assault our position." Rivera raised his head carefully and saw what Thompson meant. Enemy fighters were gathering behind cover, obviously preparing for a coordinated attack. They had maybe 2 minutes before they would be facing assault from multiple directions simultaneously. "Control, this is Serpent 6. Enemy preparing to overrun our position. We need that artillery support now, danger close or not. Serpent 6, artillery is standing by. Confirm you want fire mission on your coordinates." Rivera looked at his teammates, all of them focused and professional despite the desperate nature of their situation. These were good men, the best America had to offer. They deserved better than being trapped in an ambush because intelligence had failed them. "Confirmed, control. Fire for effect on our position. We'll try to get clear, but don't wait for our confirmation." Rivera knew he was essentially calling in their own death sentence if they couldn't move fast enough. But staying put guaranteed they would be overrun and captured or killed. At least this way, they had a chance. The enemy assault began with a shower of grenades that exploded all around their position. The concussions were deafening, and shrapnel whined through the air like angry hornets. Rivera felt something hot slice across his left arm but ignored the pain. "Move! Move! Move!" he shouted, leading his team in a desperate sprint toward higher ground. Behind them, the artillery shells were already screaming through the air. The first artillery shell landed exactly where they had been positioned 30 seconds earlier. Rivera felt the ground shake beneath his feet as he ran, loose rocks cascading down the mountainside from the blast. Behind him, Williams was helping Martinez, who had taken shrapnel in his leg during the enemy grenade barrage. "Keep moving!" Rivera shouted over the ringing in his ears. "Head for that ridgeline." Thompson provided covering fire as they moved, his rifle cracking steadily at targets on the surrounding hills. His accuracy was impressive under the circumstances, and Rivera could see enemy fighters diving for cover as his bullets found their mark. The second artillery shell landed closer to the enemy positions, sending up a massive cloud of dust and debris. Rivera allowed himself a moment of hope that the bombardment might scatter their attackers, but that hope died quickly when he saw muzzle flashes continuing from multiple positions. "These guys aren't backing down," Thompson called out as he caught up with the team. "Artillery's just making them mad." Rivera could see what Thompson meant. Professional fighters knew how to deal with artillery. They were using the noise and confusion to reposition themselves, actually getting closer to the SEAL team during the bombardment. Martinez stumbled, his wounded leg giving out. Blood was seeping through his uniform where shrapnel had torn into his thigh. Williams caught him before he could fall, but the injury was clearly slowing them down. "Chief, leave me here," Martinez said through gritted teeth. "I can hold them off while you get clear." "Nobody gets left behind," Rivera replied firmly. "Williams, help me get him up that slope." The three SEALs formed a human chain, with Thompson continuing to provide covering fire as they climbed toward better defensive positions. The rocky terrain was treacherous, made worse by loose stones and the constant threat of enemy fire. Rivera's radio crackled to life again. "Serpent 6, this is Overwatch. We have a drone in the area providing real-time intelligence. Enemy forces are regrouping and attempting to surround your new position. Copy, Overwatch. Can you see any escape routes?" "Negative, Serpent 6. You're surrounded by approximately 40 hostiles. They've established positions on all available exit routes. Rivera felt his heart sink. 40 enemies against 4 wounded SEALs was impossible odds. But his training had taught him that impossible situations sometimes had solutions that weren't obvious. Overwatch, what's our support situation? Nearest friendly forces are still 30 minutes out. Weather is clearing, so we might have air support available soon. 30 minutes. Rivera looked at his ammunition supply and estimated they had maybe 10 minutes of sustained firefight capability. The mathematics of their situation were brutal but clear. Williams had found a defensive position among some larger boulders that offered protection from multiple angles. Chief, this is the best terrain we're going to find. We can see all approaches from here. Rivera studied their new position. Williams was right. They had good fields of fire and solid cover. If they were going to make a stand, this was the place to do it. But making a stand meant accepting that they probably weren't going home. Thompson was checking his ammunition when he noticed something that made him freeze. Chief, you need to see this. Rivera followed Thompson's gaze and felt ice form in his chest. On a ridge approximately 800 meters away, he could see the distinctive outline of a heavy machine gun being set up. The weapon had the range and firepower to turn their defensive position into a killing ground. That's a DSHK heavy machine gun, Williams observed grimly. Russian-made, .50 caliber. It'll punch through our cover like paper. Rivera knew Williams was right. The rocks that were protecting them from rifle fire wouldn't stop heavy machine gun bullets. Once that weapon opened fire, their defensive position would become a death trap. Martinez had been listening to the conversation despite his pain. Chief, I might have an idea. That machine gun position is set up for long-range fire. If we could get someone close enough, they might be able to take it out. It's 800 meters of open ground, Thompson pointed out. Nobody's getting across that alive. Rivera studied the terrain between their position and the enemy machine gun. Thompson was right. The ground offered almost no cover, and they would be exposed to fire from multiple positions during any approach. His radio came to life again. Serpent 6, this is Overwatch. We're tracking additional enemy movement. Looks like they're bringing up more heavy weapons. Understood, Overwatch. Any word on that air support? Negative. Weather is still marginal for flight operations. Rivera realized they were running out of time and options. The enemy was methodically setting up to destroy them, and there wasn't much they could do to stop it. But surrender still wasn't an option. These men had families waiting for them at home, and Rivera was determined to give them every possible chance to see those families again. Listen up, Rivera said to his team. We're in a bad situation, but we're not done yet. We've got good defensive positions and plenty of ammunition. Make them pay for every meter. The first probing attack came 15 minutes later. Enemy fighters approached from the south, using covering fire and movement tactics that showed professional training. Rivera and his team engaged them with careful, aimed fire, forcing the attackers to retreat after taking several casualties. Good shooting, Rivera commented. But that was just a probe. The real attack is coming. Williams was watching the machine gun position through his scope. Chief, they're almost finished setting up that heavy weapon. Once it opens up, we're in serious trouble. Rivera could see activity around the machine gun position. Several fighters were positioning ammunition and adjusting the weapons mounting. In a few minutes, they would have overlapping fields of fire that would make movement impossible. Thompson suddenly grabbed Rivera's arm. Chief, look at that ridge to the east. There's something moving up there. Rivera turned his binoculars toward the indicated position and saw what had caught Thompson's attention. A single figure was moving carefully along the ridgeline, staying low and using the terrain for concealment. The person appeared to be alone and was moving toward the enemy machine gun position. Who the hell is that? Williams whispered. Rivera adjusted his binoculars, trying to get a better look at the mysterious figure. The distance and heat distortion made it difficult to make out details, but something about the person's movement suggested military training. Could be another SEAL team, Martinez suggested hopefully. Rivera shook his head. Negative. We're the only friendly unit in this area. Control would have told us if there was anyone else out here. The figure continued moving along the ridge, somehow avoiding detection by the enemy fighters who were focused on the SEAL team's position. Rivera watched in fascination as the person demonstrated remarkable skill in using terrain and natural concealment. Overwatch, this is Serpent 6. Are you tracking the individual moving along the eastern ridge? Serpent 6, negative. We're not showing any friendly forces in that area. Rivera felt confused and concerned. If the figure wasn't American military, then who was it? And what were they doing in the middle of a firefight? The heavy machine gun suddenly opened fire, sending massive bullets screaming toward their position. The sound was deafening, and Rivera felt the shockwaves as the bullets passed overhead. Rock chips and dust filled the air as the heavy slugs tore into their cover. Stay down! Rivera shouted unnecessarily. His team was already pressed against the ground, understanding that exposure to heavy machine gun fire meant instant death. The enemy used the cover of the machine gun fire to launch another assault. This time, fighters approached from multiple directions simultaneously, forcing the SEALs to divide their attention and firepower. Thompson engaged targets to the north while Williams covered the south. Rivera found himself shooting at enemies approaching from the west, each shot carefully aimed to conserve ammunition. Martinez, despite his wound, was providing covering fire with his sidearm. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. The SEALs were accurate shooters, but they were being overwhelmed by sheer numbers. For every enemy fighter they dropped, two more seemed to take his place. Rivera's rifle clicked empty, and he reached for a fresh magazine. As he reloaded, he noticed that the mysterious figure on the eastern ridge had reached a position almost directly across from the enemy machine gun. Williams cursed loudly as a bullet grazed his shoulder. "Chief, we can't hold this much longer. They're getting too close." Rivera could see that Williams was right. Enemy fighters had advanced to within 50 meters of their position. At that range, grenades and automatic fire would soon make their defensive position untenable. The heavy machine gun continued its devastating fire, methodically destroying their cover. Rivera knew that in a few more minutes, they would be completely exposed to the weapon's crushing firepower. Martinez suddenly cried out in pain as a bullet found his already wounded leg. The injury wasn't fatal, but it was clear that the young SEAL was losing blood and strength rapidly. "Corpseman!" Thompson called out instinctively, though they all knew there was no medical help coming. Rivera made a decision that went against his training but seemed to be their only option. "Williams, prepare to use all your explosives at once. If we're going down, we're taking as many of them with us as possible." Williams nodded grimly and began preparing his remaining grenades and demolition charges. It wasn't much, but it might create enough chaos to allow some of the team to escape. The mysterious figure on the ridge suddenly stood up, clearly silhouetted against the sky. Rivera expected to see the person cut down immediately by enemy fire, but something unexpected happened instead. A single rifle shot rang out across the valley, audible even over the machine gun fire. The heavy machine gun suddenly went silent, and Rivera could see figures scrambling around the weapon position. "What just happened?" Thompson asked, momentarily stopping his return fire. Rivera focused his binoculars on the machine gun position. The weapon was definitely out of action, though he couldn't see exactly what had disabled it. More importantly, the enemy fighters seemed confused and disorganized. Another rifle shot echoed across the mountains, and Rivera saw an enemy fighter on the north ridge suddenly disappear from view. Whoever was shooting was demonstrating remarkable skill at extreme range. The enemy assault faltered as fighters began looking around nervously, trying to locate the new threat. Their coordination broke down as unit leaders struggled to understand what was happening. "Overwatch, are you seeing this?" Rivera asked into his radio. "Affirm, Serpent 6. Someone just eliminated the heavy machine gun crew with precision fire. We're trying to identify the shooter." Rivera watched in amazement as more shots rang out from the eastern ridge. Each bullet found its target with surgical precision, and the enemy fighters began showing signs of panic. Their confident assault turned into confused defensive positions. Williams grabbed Rivera's arm excitedly. "Chief, whoever that is, they just gave us a chance. The enemy is scattered and confused." Rivera could see that Williams was right. The organized attack had broken down into individual groups of fighters trying to find cover from the mysterious sniper. It was the first real break they'd had since the ambush began. But Rivera also knew that this opportunity wouldn't last long. The enemy would regroup soon, and they would be even more determined to eliminate the SEAL team before dealing with the new threat. "Get ready to move," Rivera ordered. "We need to use this confusion to find better positions." Rivera helped Martinez to his feet while Williams provided covering fire. The enemy was still scattered and confused, but Rivera knew their window of opportunity was closing fast. Professional fighters didn't stay disorganized for long. "Thompson, take point," Rivera ordered. "Head for that cluster of rocks at 2 o'clock. We need better defensive positions before they regroup." The team moved as quickly as Martinez's wounds would allow, constantly scanning for threats. The mysterious sniper continued to engage targets, each shot precisely placed to maximum effect. Rivera counted at least 6 enemy fighters down, all apparently killed with single shots at ranges that would challenge even the best military marksman. Williams was helping support Martinez when another shot rang out from the ridge. An enemy fighter who had been positioning himself to ambush the moving SEAL suddenly crumpled behind his rock. The sniper was clearly watching their movement and providing overwatch protection. "Whoever that is, they're keeping us alive," Thompson observed as they reached the new position. Rivera had to agree. The sniper's intervention had not only broken up the enemy assault but was actively protecting the SEAL team's movement. This wasn't random shooting, it was coordinated support from someone with exceptional skills. Martinez collapsed behind their new cover, breathing heavily. The blood loss from his wounds was becoming a serious problem. Williams immediately began applying field dressings, but they all knew that Martinez needed real medical attention soon. "Chief, I'm slowing you down," Martinez said weakly. "Leave me here with a radio. I can call in adjustments for artillery support." "We've been through this already," Rivera replied firmly. "Nobody gets left behind." But, privately, Rivera was beginning to worry that Martinez's condition might force him to make an impossible choice. The young SEAL was losing strength rapidly, and they still had no clear path to extraction. Rivera's radio crackled with an update from Overwatch. "Serpent 6, we're tracking the sniper on the eastern ridge. Thermal imaging shows a single individual with what appears to be a high-powered rifle. Still unable to identify. Any word on our extraction support?" "Affirmative. Quick reaction force is 15 minutes out. Air support available in 10 minutes if weather holds." 15 minutes. Rivera looked at their tactical situation and estimated they could hold their current position for maybe half that time. The enemy was already beginning to regroup, and the sniper couldn't cover every angle of approach. Thompson was scanning their surroundings when he noticed something that made him tense. "Chief, movement on our 6 o'clock. Looks like they're trying to flank us again." Rivera turned to see enemy fighters moving through a ravine that would bring them behind the SEAL team's position. The sniper on the ridge couldn't engage targets in the ravine due to the angle and terrain. "Williams, can you discourage them with some explosive persuasion?" Williams checked his remaining grenades. "I've got 2 frags left. Might slow them down, but won't stop them." Rivera made a quick tactical decision. "Thompson, you and Williams hold this position. I'm going to intercept that flanking movement." "Chief, that's suicide," Thompson protested. "You'll be exposed to fire from multiple positions." Rivera was already checking his rifle and ammunition. "Someone has to stop them, or we'll be fighting on 2 fronts. Keep Martinez covered and watch for the QRF." Rivera moved out before his team could protest further. He knew Thompson was right about the risk, but allowing the enemy to complete their flanking movement would doom them all. Sometimes leadership meant accepting the worst job for yourself. Moving carefully through the broken terrain, Rivera could hear the enemy fighters in the ravine below. They were making good time and would be in position to assault the SEAL team's rear in just a few minutes. Rivera had to stop them, but doing so would expose him to return fire from their main force. The mysterious sniper seemed to understand Rivera's situation. Another shot rang out, and Rivera saw an enemy fighter on the main ridge suddenly drop. The sniper was systematically eliminating threats to provide Rivera with the best possible chance. Rivera reached a position overlooking the ravine and could see 3 enemy fighters moving quickly through the rocky terrain. They were armed with automatic weapons and moved with the confidence of experienced fighters. Taking careful aim with his rifle, Rivera waited for the right moment. When the lead fighter exposed himself to climb over a boulder, Rivera's shot took him center mass. The man dropped immediately, but his companions quickly took cover and began returning fire. Bullets whined off the rocks around Rivera's position as he moved to a new firing point. The enemy fighters in the ravine were now aware of his presence and were actively hunting him. Rivera's radio buzzed with Thompson's voice. "Chief, we can see muzzle flashes from your position. Are you okay? Still breathing? How's Martinez? Hanging in there. Williams has the bleeding stopped, but he's pretty weak." Rivera engaged the second enemy fighter as the man tried to advance through the ravine. His shot wounded the fighter, who immediately began calling for help in what sounded like Arabic. The wounded fighter's calls were answered quickly. Rivera could see additional enemy fighters moving toward the ravine to support their flanking force. What had started as a three-man problem was rapidly becoming a much larger threat. Another rifle shot echoed across the valley, and Rivera saw one of the responding enemy fighters drop. The sniper was still providing support, picking off targets with mechanical precision. Rivera had never seen shooting like this outside of specialized sniper schools. Williams' voice came through the radio with urgency. "Chief, we've got vehicles approaching from the south. Looks like technical trucks with mounted weapons." Rivera cursed under his breath. Technical trucks meant mounted heavy machine guns or even small cannons. Against that kind of firepower, their rocky defensive positions would provide no protection at all. The remaining enemy fighter in the ravine suddenly broke cover, charging directly at Rivera's position while firing his automatic weapon. Rivera rolled sideways and returned fire, dropping the attacker just meters from his position. But the victory was short-lived. Rivera could hear the rumble of diesel engines getting closer, and dust clouds on the horizon confirmed that enemy reinforcements were arriving in force. "Overwatch, this is Serpent 6. Enemy vehicles approaching from the south. We need immediate air support. Serpent 6, Warthog flight is 5 minutes out. Can you hold that long?" Rivera looked at his ammunition supply and estimated the enemy forces now converging on their position. 5 minutes might as well be 5 hours given their current situation. "Thompson, what's your ammunition status?" "Down to my last 2 magazines. Williams has about the same." Rivera rejoined his team, breathing hard from his sprint back to their position. Martinez was conscious but obviously weakening from blood loss. They were running out of time, ammunition, and options. The first technical truck appeared on a ridge about 400 meters away. Rivera could see the distinctive outline of a mounted heavy machine gun, and, worse, what looked like a rocket-propelled grenade launcher. "Take cover!" Rivera shouted as the truck's machine gun opened fire. Heavy bullets hammered their position with devastating effect. Unlike the earlier rifle fire, these rounds punched through their rock cover like it was cardboard. Stone fragments filled the air, and Rivera felt something hot slice across his cheek. Williams was preparing his last grenades when the second technical truck appeared. Now they were taking fire from multiple heavy weapons, and their cover was being systematically destroyed. "Chief, this is it," Thompson said calmly. "We're not getting out of this one." Rivera started to respond when another rifle shot rang out from the eastern ridge. To his amazement, he saw the gunner on the first technical truck slump over his weapon. The sniper had made a shot at over 400 meters while the truck was moving. The second truck immediately began evasive maneuvers, but another shot found its mark. The driver pitched forward, and the vehicle careened into a boulder, throwing its passengers clear. "How is that possible?" Williams asked in amazement. Those were moving targets at extreme range. Rivera was wondering the same thing. The shooting skills being demonstrated exceeded anything he'd seen in his military career. Whoever was up on that ridge was operating at a level that bordered on superhuman. The enemy fighters who had survived the truck crash were now taking cover and trying to locate the sniper's position. Rivera could see them pointing toward the eastern ridge and coordinating their response. His radio crackled with an update from Overwatch. "Serpent 6, we have multiple aircraft inbound. Warthogs are 2 minutes out, followed by Apache gunships." Rivera felt a surge of hope, but he also knew that 2 minutes was still a long time in their current situation. The enemy had them located and was bringing up more forces. The mysterious sniper was keeping them alive, but couldn't protect them from every angle. Martinez suddenly grabbed Rivera's arm with surprising strength. "Chief, that sniper isn't random. Look at the shooting pattern." Rivera studied the locations where enemy fighters had been eliminated. Martinez was right, there was a clear pattern to the sniper's target selection. Every shot had been designed to maximum tactical advantage for the SEAL team. "It's like whoever's up there knows exactly what we need," Thompson observed. Williams was watching the eastern ridge through his scope when he saw something that made him freeze. "Chief, I can see the sniper's position. There's a lone figure up there, and, I think it might be a woman." Rivera borrowed Williams' scope and focused on the distant ridge. The heat distortion made it difficult to see clearly, but the silhouette did appear smaller and more delicate than he would have expected from such a lethal marksman. Another enemy assault team was forming up for an attack when the first A-10 Warthog appeared on the horizon. The distinctive twin-engine aircraft was still distant, but Rivera knew that once it got within range, the enemy's heavy weapons would be neutralized. The sniper on the ridge fired again, and the enemy assault team's leader dropped. The remaining fighters immediately scattered, their coordination broken by the loss of their commander. Rivera keyed his radio to coordinate with the incoming air support. "Warthog flight, this is Serpent 6. We are pinned down in a rocky area with heavy enemy presence on multiple ridges. Friendly sniper is operating on the eastern ridge. Copy, Serpent 6. We have you located on thermal. Beginning attack run on enemy positions." The sound of the A-10's cannon filled the valley like thunder. The massive 30mm gun fired in long bursts, each round capable of destroying armored vehicles. Enemy positions on the ridges disappeared in clouds of dust and debris. But Rivera noticed something that worried him. The airstrikes were hitting every enemy position except the eastern ridge where the mysterious sniper was located. The pilots were clearly avoiding that area to protect the unknown marksman. "Warthog flight, be advised you have a friendly sniper on the eastern ridge. Unknown identity but providing critical support to our position." "Copy that, Serpent 6. We'll give that ridge a wide berth." The air attacks continued for several minutes, systematically destroying enemy positions and equipment. When the guns finally fell silent, the valley was transformed. Where there had been coordinated enemy forces, there were now scattered survivors fleeing toward distant ridges. Apache gunships arrived next, using their advanced sensors to hunt down the remaining enemy fighters. The combined air assault had broken the ambush completely, turning certain defeat into decisive victory. Rivera looked around at his team. They were all wounded, exhausted, and nearly out of ammunition, but they were alive. Against impossible odds, they had survived. "Overwatch, this is Serpent 6. Enemy forces have been neutralized. Request immediate extraction for wounded personnel." "Copy, Serpent 6. Medical evacuation is inbound, ETA 4 minutes. Rivera turned his binoculars back toward the eastern ridge, hoping to get a better look at their mysterious guardian angel. But the ridge appeared empty now, with no sign of the sniper who had saved their lives. The medical evacuation helicopter appeared over the ridge like salvation itself, its rotors beating a rhythm that meant survival. Rivera watched the aircraft approach while keeping one eye on the surrounding terrain. Even with air support overhead, he wouldn't feel safe until his team was airborne and heading home. Martinez had lost consciousness during the final airstrikes, his body finally succumbing to blood loss and trauma. Williams was already preparing him for medical evacuation, checking his pulse and ensuring his airway remained clear. "Dustoff is coming in hot," Thompson reported, watching the helicopters approach. "Looks like they're not planning to stay on the ground long." Rivera understood the pilot's urgency. Despite the airstrikes, enemy forces were still in the area. A helicopter on the ground made an attractive target for any surviving fighters with rocket launchers or heavy weapons. The helicopter settled into a small clearing about 50 meters from their position, its crew chief immediately jumping out with a medical stretcher. 2 additional crew members provided security while the aircraft's engines remained at flight power. "Let's move!" Rivera shouted over the rotor noise. "Williams, help me get Martinez to the bird." The team moved quickly across the open ground, acutely aware that they were exposed during the transfer. Rivera couldn't shake the feeling that enemy eyes were still watching from the surrounding ridges. The crew chief was an experienced combat medic who immediately took charge of Martinez's care. "What's his status?" the medic asked while checking Martinez's vital signs. Multiple shrapnel wounds, significant blood loss, unconscious for the past 10 minutes, Williams reported. We've controlled the bleeding, but he needs surgery. The medic nodded professionally while connecting Martinez to monitoring equipment. We'll have him at the field hospital in 15 minutes. He's going to make it. Rivera felt relief flood through him at those words. Martinez was young, with his whole life ahead of him. The thought of telling the kid's family that he hadn't made it home was something Rivera couldn't bear. Thompson was helping load their equipment when he suddenly grabbed Rivera's arm. Chief, look at the eastern ridge. Rivera turned to see a figure standing silhouetted against the sky on the distant ridge. Even at this distance, he could tell it was the sniper who had saved their lives. The figure stood motionless for a moment, then raised one hand in what appeared to be a farewell gesture. Should we try to extract them too? Williams asked. Rivera considered the option, but the helicopter crew chief was already signaling for immediate departure. Negative. We don't have time, and we don't even know if they want extraction. As the helicopter lifted off, Rivera kept his eyes fixed on the distant ridge. The mysterious sniper remained visible until they crested the first mountain, then disappeared from view forever. The flight to the field hospital gave Rivera time to process what had happened. His team had walked into a carefully planned ambush that should have resulted in their deaths or capture. They had been saved by the intervention of an unknown sniper whose shooting skills exceeded anything he had encountered in his military career. Williams was sitting across from him in the helicopter, shouting over the engine noise. Chief, who do you think that was up there? Rivera shook his head. I don't know. But, whoever it was, they knew exactly what they were doing. Thompson was monitoring Martinez's condition while the crew chief worked. Think we'll ever find out? Probably not, Rivera replied. Some questions don't get answered. The helicopter began its descent toward the field hospital, a cluster of buildings surrounded by defensive positions and communication equipment. Rivera could see medical personnel already waiting on the landing pad, prepared to take Martinez into surgery immediately. As soon as the aircraft touched down, Martinez was transferred to a waiting medical team and rushed into the hospital. Rivera and his remaining team members were directed to a debriefing area where intelligence officers were waiting with detailed questions about their mission. Major Sarah Collins was the intelligence officer assigned to debrief the team. She was a career military officer with multiple deployments and a reputation for thoroughness. Her questions about the ambush were expected, but Rivera sensed she was particularly interested in the unknown sniper. Chief Rivera, can you describe the shooting skills you observed from the eastern ridge? Rivera chose his words carefully. Professional level marksmanship at extreme ranges. Multiple targets eliminated with single shots. Moving targets engaged successfully at ranges exceeding 400 meters. Major Collins made notes while Rivera spoke. Did you observe any other details about this individual? Equipment, clothing, movement patterns? Williams interjected, Ma'am, one thing stood out. The target selection was perfect from a tactical standpoint. Every shot maximized our survival chances. What do you mean by that? Thompson explained, it wasn't random shooting. Whoever was up there understood our tactical situation and engaged targets that provided the maximum benefit to our position. Major Collins exchanged glances with another intelligence officer before continuing. Are you saying this person appeared to have military training? Rivera nodded. Advanced military training. Special operations level, possibly sniper specialist background. The debriefing continued for 2 hours, with the intelligence officers asking detailed questions about every aspect of the engagement. Rivera could tell they were particularly focused on identifying the mysterious sniper, but he had no additional information to provide. After the formal debriefing, Rivera visited Martinez in the hospital's intensive care unit. The young SEAL was conscious and stable, though he would need several weeks of recovery before returning to duty. How you feeling, Martinez? Like I got hit by a truck, Chief. But the docs say I'll be back to full duty in a couple months. Rivera sat down beside the hospital bed. You did good out there. Kept your head when things went sideways. Martinez was quiet for a moment before speaking again. Chief, who was that sniper? I keep thinking about those shots. I've never seen anything like that. Rivera had been asking himself the same question. I don't know, son. But, whoever it was, they saved our lives. Think we'll ever find out who it was? Rivera looked out the hospital window at the Afghan mountains in the distance. Some things are meant to stay mysteries. 3 days later, Rivera received an unexpected visit from Colonel James Harrison, the base commander. The colonel was a combat veteran with 30 years of service, someone who rarely made personal visits to individual team members. Chief Rivera, I've read the after-action reports from your mission. Unusual circumstances, to say the least. Rivera stood at attention. Yes, sir. We were lucky to have that support when we needed it. The colonel gestured for Rivera to sit down. What I'm about to tell you is classified, Chief. We've been investigating the identity of your mysterious sniper. Rivera felt his pulse quicken. Did you find out who it was, sir? Colonel Harrison pulled out a file folder and opened it carefully. We tracked the sniper's route up the eastern ridge using satellite imagery and ground reconnaissance. What we found was interesting. Rivera waited while the colonel organized his thoughts. The position where the sniper operated showed evidence of professional fieldcraft. Proper height construction, minimal disturbance to the surrounding area, and clear fields of fire toward all enemy positions. That confirms military training, sir. Yes, but here's where it gets unusual. We found no evidence of how this person arrived at that position or departed afterward. No vehicle tracks, no footprints leading to or from the area, nothing. Rivera felt confused. That's not possible, sir. Everyone leaves some kind of trace. Colonel Harrison nodded. That's what our tracking specialists said. But they went over that area with fine-tooth combs and found nothing beyond the actual firing position. What does that mean? The colonel closed the file folder. It means we're dealing with someone who has training beyond what we typically encounter. Someone who knows how to move through hostile territory without leaving evidence. Rivera thought about the shooting skills he had witnessed. Sir, do you think this person might be American military? Maybe someone operating under deep cover? Colonel Harrison shook his head. We've checked with all special operations units in the region. Nobody had personnel in that area during your mission. Then, who? The colonel stood up, preparing to leave. That's the million-dollar question, Chief. All I can tell you is that someone with extraordinary skills decided to intervene in your mission. We may never know why. After the colonel left, Rivera sat alone thinking about the conversation. The mystery of their guardian angel seemed to be deepening rather than resolving. Someone with advanced military skills had appeared exactly when needed, saved their lives with impossible shots, then vanished without a trace. 2 weeks later, Rivera and his team were back at their home base, preparing for their next deployment. Martinez was still recovering but expected to rejoin them soon. The mission had become legendary within the SEAL community, though most of the details remained classified. Thompson approached Rivera while he was cleaning his rifle. Chief, I've been thinking about something. What if that sniper wasn't there by accident? Rivera looked up from his weapon maintenance. What do you mean? What if someone knew we were walking into an ambush and positioned themselves to help us? Rivera considered the possibility. That would mean someone had intelligence about the operation that they didn't share through normal channels. Williams joined the conversation. Or it could mean someone was tracking enemy activity in that area and recognized the ambush setup. Rivera shook his head. The timing was too perfect. That person was in position before we even arrived at the target area. The three SEALs sat in silence, each considering the implications. If Thompson was right, it meant their mysterious savior had advanced knowledge of their mission and had deliberately positioned themselves to provide support. Rivera's phone rang, interrupting their speculation. The caller ID showed it was Major Collins from Intelligence. Chief Rivera, we've received some additional information about your mission. Can you come to the intelligence office? Rivera arrived at the intelligence office to find Major Collins waiting with a new file folder and a serious expression. Chief, we've been analyzing communication intercepts from the time period of your mission. We found something unusual. Major Collins opened the folder and pulled out several sheets of paper covered with Arabic text and English translations. These are intercepted radio transmissions from the enemy forces that ambushed you. They were coordinating their attack when something unexpected happened. Rivera leaned forward to study the documents. What kind of unexpected? According to these transmissions, the enemy commanders reported taking fire from an unknown sniper they called the Ghost. They were convinced it was a supernatural entity sent to protect American forces. Rivera felt chills run down his spine. A ghost? Major Collins nodded. The enemy fighters were genuinely terrified. Several radio messages described their belief that they were fighting something beyond human capability. Rivera thought about the impossible shots he had witnessed. Maybe they weren't entirely wrong. There's more, Chief. We found similar radio intercepts from 3 other incidents in this region over the past 6 months. Each time, American forces in desperate situations received support from an unknown sniper. Each time, the enemy described encountering the Ghost. Rivera stared at the documents, trying to process this information. Are you saying this person has been operating in the area for months? That's what the evidence suggests. Someone has been systematically protecting American forces, then disappearing without making contact with our command structure. Rivera left the intelligence office with more questions than answers. The mystery of their guardian angel had become something larger and more complex than he had imagined. That evening, Rivera stood on the base perimeter looking out at the Afghan mountains. Somewhere out there, a person with extraordinary skills was operating independently, protecting American forces and then vanishing like smoke. Rivera would never learn the sniper's identity or motivations. But he would never forget the debt he owed to the mysterious figure who had saved his team when all seemed lost. In a war full of uncertainty and loss, it was strangely comforting to know that guardian angels sometimes came armed with rifles and the skills to use them. Years later, when Rivera had retired from military service and returned home to his family, he would sometimes tell his children about the mission that changed his understanding of what was possible. He would describe the impossible shots, the perfect timing, and the mysterious figure who had appeared exactly when needed. His children would ask if he believed in angels, and Rivera would smile and tell them that angels come in many forms. Sometimes they appear as fellow soldiers, sometimes as strangers who offer help when it's most needed. And sometimes, when good people are in desperate situations, angels appear on distant ridges with rifles and the skill to use them perfectly. The identity of the sniper remained classified and unknown, but the impact of their intervention rippled through the lives of everyone they had saved. Martinez returned to full duty and completed 3 more successful deployments. Thompson advanced to become a team leader himself. Williams continued to serve with distinction until his own retirement. And Rivera carried with him always the knowledge that in humanity's darkest moments, there are people willing to risk everything to protect others, asking for nothing in return except the knowledge that they made a difference when it mattered most.